Welcome to our Harmonius podcast series. My name is Michael Francis Lott, and I am here with author Peter Wells, who is the author of the book Notes from the West Pole. And today we're going to be diving into his piece called Renaissance.
Our objective is a more harmonious way of life than we've inherited. After many centuries of obedience to the ruling governmental and religious authorities, the time has come to return to the inner truth and empower ourselves from within. This doesn't require conflict with the so-called authorities. They continue to exist whether or not we empower them. The personal power comes from the soul within, no matter what the teaching. We need to make our systems whole, to heal the inherited divisions with a fresh worldview and a new story of what we're doing here together. We can now build anew from the ground up a new structure of human relationship in which personal freedom is implicit. Personal freedom leads to personal responsibility and to the possibility of a consensual democracy. Government against the person is not working. It never has. Why would we have a democracy with government against the person? It harms all of us. The sovereignty of the king yielded to the sovereignty of the nation. Now, the sovereignty of the nation yields to the sovereignty of the person. All around the world, an ancient understanding is reborn. Once confined to the tribe, the ancient truth now applies to the whole human presence on this ever-changing planet. We are one human family. We are not ruled by governments or tyrants. We are ruled by the living intelligence within us. And this intelligence has no master. The source of the life energy and the truths of our existence are within our personal power and happening now. This life is sacred, and billions of us want a peaceful world and a more harmonious human family. Let's make it happen. Let's be harmonious on purpose, one person at a time.
So thank you for that piece, Peter. The title of the piece is called Renaissance. And you kind of explain what you mean in that piece, but I kind of just want to hear more in your own words, sort of in the moment. What is Renaissance? What is that?
That's a rebirth. And it's a rebirth of the human spirit in this case, because we have been under the thrall of domination for centuries. And at this time, we have just a little bit of light squeaking out that suggests that we might become free from that. And that freedom can be heralded in by a renaissance. The Renaissance frees the individual person, and especially felt by artists who feel free to come forward with their own version of what's going on. So Renaissance is a rebirth, and we're squeaking into it.
Something sort of caught my attention in what you said. You said there's a little bit of light that's squeaking out or something like that. And that is like an opening to this Renaissance. What is that little bit of light that is squeaking out? What is that?
Well, it comes from the sun. And we have been in darkness. We've been in the darkness of a conquered life, to use a phrase that we've used. And the idea that every child is taught and every person is born into is this idea that we're dominated by a power greater than ourselves. And the little squeak of light is allowing the light to come into this inner being that we are, and to recognize that we're actually free to be this being that we are. We're not actually, in truth, dominated by an outside power. What we're doing is we're awakening to our real inner power. And that inner power is going to lead us out of the darkness into a renaissance, a rebirth of the human spirit. That's my hypothesis.
So, to kind of summarize what you're saying that this collective renaissance comes through us allowing ourselves to be fully empowered from within.
Right.
Right? Okay. So in the piece you say something about how the sovereignty of the king yields to the nation, and now we're moving into a place where the sovereignty of the nation yields to the power of the individual. Right. So you're talking about us kind of being ruled in a sense through our own instinct, through our own intuition. Now, do you feel like we can trust people to be ruled fully from their instinct, from their intuition?
Well, that's really what's been going on. We have to yield to these outside powers in order for them to have power over us. In fact, the power has always been within us and is not really movable. This life, the life we're living, comes from within. And just because there's a dictator or a tyrant or some religious person who is saying it is this way and we have to be obedient, we don't have to be. We can follow our own instinct, our own intuition, and be this.
Do we need that external authority to kind of help us organize our social structures and our systems?
Well, we need the function of it, but we don't need the master forcing us into jails or forcing us into wars or saying that it's in power over us. The only form that we have is the individual person. The human family is made up of individual persons. Each one has its own brain, its own body, its own soul. And it's living this life as a whole being. If we're going to have a government, if we're going to have something that is working for us, it has to work for the person. We don't have government for the person. Even though democracy is that, we don't have a true democracy. We have a majority rule power that forces us, just like the king did, just like the ruler has done. And we're forced to obey under threat of punishment. So that, I do believe, has to go. The thing that we need more than anything else, as we've discussed, is a compassionate rule of law. And we have to dispense with, bit by bit, this practice of having majority rule dominate the whole population. So to answer your question, though, the main point is that what we're talking about is we're not talking about a new social order. We're talking about the freedom and the responsibility of the person to accept that personal power as the real guide in this life.
Okay, so with the Renaissance, it's more so, I mean, it does include our social systems, but what you're pointing to really is a personal renaissance. It's like an individual revival of our own inner light, or our own inner radiance.
Well, there's been renaissances before, the one in the the late Middle Ages, and you could say that the 1590s in England were a kind of renaissance where Shakespeare and all the playwrights suddenly emerged, holding a mirror up to the social system. But now we're on our way into a new age, and the powers that be are not working, and everything feels kind of dysfunctional, and we have nothing really to believe in that's outside of us. We have to believe in, therefore, what's within us. And because what's within us is the intelligence of the universe. That's what we're wearing. And that's what we're trying to utilize. But we've been so confused by the powers outside of us with the dictates and with the ideas that this is all a division, a dualism, one against the other. We've been so confused by that that our own impression is itself dualistic. However, we are one human family, and we're approaching, I believe, a way of life that can work for all of us. Just a little bit of light squeaking through.
So beautiful. I wanted to touch on another phrase that really caught my attention in your piece, which was you said that we are governed by an intelligence that recognizes no master. Now, somebody could take that the wrong way and think, how arrogant. This person recognizes no person of greater knowledge or greater authority. So what does that mean exactly? Because obviously there are masters, there are spiritual masters that are master mechanics, master teachers. There are these masters in our culture that help to guide us in various fields. So what do you mean when you say we are guided by an intelligence that recognizes no master?
Well, the master is a separate function within, the human family. You can be you master in anything that, requires skill. But the intelligence that we're using has no master because it's the intelligence of the universe. And it's not possible to divide it. It's only what it is. And we have access to it, each one of us. The governments, the religions, the leaders don't have necessarily access to it, even though they are participating in it. So the master of our own being is an intelligence which has no other authority than itself. How do you get beyond the intelligence of the universe?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of people that somehow think that they are, or that they have in some way, through trying to sort of control or suppress people's own innate intelligence or suppress that own knowing that we all possess. Because I think that the people that are in power, those kind of behind the scenes of the governmental structures, I believe that they do set the intention to confuse people, as you said, and to sort of cut them off from their own innate inner knowing. And so this renaissance that you speak of is us sort of coming home to that, coming back to that, if I understand what you're saying correctly.
Yeah, we already are what we're discovering. The mind and science doesn't understand the whole brain. There's no way, we can't draw a map of the whole being and say, well, this is this and this is this. And yet we are the whole being. So we're functioning in our complete way. But there are people who will say, for example, that we're not using our whole brain. Well, that's absurd. It's there and it's functioning. Just because we don't understand it doesn't mean we're not using it. We are using it. And this wonderful brain has capabilities that we haven't uncovered yet. So the intelligence of the universe is operating in the whole brain.
Wow. So you, being someone that's immersed in this philosophy and immersed in these ideas, since you realize your connection to the universe, to the whole thing, how do you channel that? How do you harness that? How do you put that into practicality in your life?
Well, by doing this. But the point really is that we're in a mess, our society, and we're not really believing in it. We think it's falling apart. The justice system, the political system, the legal system, all of it is confused and in chaos, actually. So we have been infected by this chaos. And this chaos that says that the world is divisible between friend and enemy and good and evil is simply inadequate. The world is far more complicated than that, and far richer, and far more beneficial. We do not need to divide ourselves. Our culture is divisive and judgmental, and we don't really need that from within. Our own being has arrived here with these capabilities and is a special, magical, mysterious fact. Just because we don't understand it completely doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We don't understand lots of things, and yet we ourselves exist without knowing. So I don't know anything. Not really. You know, what we're talking about, what I can talk about is the craziness of the culture we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
That insists on a dualistic approach. Machiavelli, you know, the famous Italian prince of the Middle Ages, had advice, because he was trying to be a ruler, that the best way to rule was first to divide and then conquer. And that's what we've got. We have been divided and conquered. There's a squeak of light, though, coming in, and we can see our freedom. Our freedom is right here. We already had it. Let's honor what we already have.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Oh,
for
you're
this
very
conversation, Peter. Stay connected with us and get the book Notes from the West Pole on our website, www.harmonius.com, and that's spelled Harmony Us with a Y. Thanks for listening.